Hi. So, my current project, I'm remodeling my bathroom. As you can see, I've gutted the whole thing. And I'm going to be tiling it. So I've switched the bath around. The taps used to be at this end, so we decided to switch that around. And I've also swapped the toilet and the basin. If you can see, the basin used to be there against the wall, and the toilet used to be here in the middle. So decided to move the toilet further away from the bath, and also then put the taps down that end and then lying further away from the toilet, I suppose, to make it a little bit more and putting the sink in there. That's not a problem. That's correct. I'm going to have to get another piece of wood for that. Anyway, so freestanding sink. So I did used to have, it was all clad in wood that was painted kind of pale blue colour, not the same colour as this wall. Anyway, so I'm going to be tiling all of the walls, and I just want to give some advice on how to start tiling. Right, so before I start tiling, I'm just going to go through some tips on how to actually lay the tiles on the wall, or set the tiles on the wall. And the key thing is to know that a wall, or certainly the corners, the joins in a wall, are not straight. They're not vertical, and they're not straight. So if you look along this wall here, you can see it comes down near where that paint's come off. It goes down, and then there's a noticeable kink out to the right. So if I was laying tiles on that far wall and I tried to lay them up from the ground against that corner, they'd be coming out all kinked. So never lay tiles or start laying tiles against the corner. What you need to do is, as I've done here, I went to the hardware shop, DIY shop, and I went through about half a dozen different pieces looking for a really straight piece of wood. I think that's 70 by 20, I think 70 by 20. Screwed in one end, and I just put the level on the top of it and screwed in the other end, and then a couple along the way just to support it. And that forms a perfectly straight horizontal line which I can lay my tiles against. So when I start laying, I'll put plaster on the wall, cement on the wall, and the first tile will just sit there like that. The next tile will sit next to it, and I'll do a full row, and then I'll go up the next row, another row, another row, another row. And that will get me up the wall. The wall itself is reasonably flat, and it needs to be before you start laying. But I won't lay any tiles that go into the corner. So I'll lay this tile here. I'll lay this tile here. I won't lay this tile, and I'll go up all the way up the wall, and I'll stop shy of the ceiling. So the last full tile I'll lay up there, and then I'll be going along, go along to this end, and no tile will touch the corner. And that way, all the tiles that I'm laying in the middle will all be perfectly aligned with each other, all lined up, nothing to distract or push it crooked or have any impact on getting a nice even layout. Then, once that's all up, and probably once they're actually set as well, then I'll come along and start laying all the edge tiles. So I will cut this tile, I'll cut the end of it here. I'll show you how to do that when we're actually doing it, but I'll cut the end of it here, and then this tile will slide along and will go in there. Same for the next one. Next one I'll measure and cut each individual tile to then fill out the gaps all the way around to the edge. When I come to the bath then I'll be cutting an L shape out of it. That will go in and some down the side there. So that's really the only, that's the most important thing with laying tiles, is start on a straight edge and just lay off that. Don't touch any of the edges, any of the corners, until you've laid a solid block of tiles, and then you go in and just fill in the gaps afterwards. Right. Okay, right. The next thing is what I call transitions. And what that means is, where's my tile I've drawn on? There we go. As you're tiling, if I lay these tiles here, if I'm tiling up to the bottom, up here, if this tile ends here, for example, then when I lay the next tile, it will come here, and as I go across the bottom of the top of the bath rather, I'll be cutting just this little piece off the bottom of the tile for the next tile that goes along there, so the tops are all lined up. And that gives me a nice looking finish. If this tile was to end up not here, but if it had ended up here, what would happen is that as I went across the top, what I'd have to do is cut a teeny little sliver of tile. Where are we? A teeny little sliver of tile just for that little piece, which would go along the top of the bath underneath. So the tiles would be going along like this, and there'd be a teeny little piece going along in there. And that's generally considered a bit unsightly. It's also quite tricky to cut pieces that are that thin. They can become quite fragile, and so so you can get wastage like that. It's also tricky to get them to actually sit square, because when it's that narrow, they can tilt back and forth quite easily, and it's difficult to get them to sit flat and flush and level with the rest of the tiles. So there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do it, not the least of which it looks quite unsightly having just a teeny little piece there. So as this tile comes up, I can have it here, but as soon as it reaches the top of the bath, it cannot go there anymore. It has to jump up to, I would say, about here as a minimum thickness of how much the tile I would want to have it so it looks nice. Any of this would be nice. The higher the better. Here would be great. There would be great. That's about as close as I want to get. So anywhere in between there would be fine. But once you start getting down here, you end up with a thin piece which doesn't look nice. So what you've got to do, and this is where it gets tricky, is I need to have it somewhere here. The problem I've got is over there, I've got a window. And the same rule applies on this corner, but in reverse. So if I have this tile here, that's all fine. But if I start getting up to here, then I end up with a really thin little piece along the front of the windowsill, which looks really ugly. Same thing then on the top of the window. Then I've got the shelf that the basin sits on. I've got the bottom of that cupboard. I've got the top of that cupboard. And I've got the top of the door. So those are all the transition points that I've got in this room where I need to make sure that the tile has a reasonable thickness as it crosses that transition point. So what I've done to make life easy is I've drawn a vertical line on the wall, and I've measured the height off the floor of each of those transition points, and I've put a mark on the line where the transition point happens. So there you can see the bath, the shelf, the cupboard, the window. I'll cover that later. And then we've got the top of the cupboard, the top of the door, and the top of the window. Now you notice I've drawn there's a little shape on the left hand side of each of those. That's telling me the shape of the tile that I need to cut. So on these is going to be a down L shape, that one's going to be an up L shape, and the ones at the top is an up kind of an L shape. So when I'm trying to work out the layout for where the tiles need to go, I know which way I need to have the thick piece and which place I'm having the cutout. So now try and bring this to life a bit. This is where it starts to get even trickier. So I've decided we've just covered the fact that we don't want to have this tile here because it'll give me a teeny little piece just above the top of the bath. So this tile has got to start here, but as we said, I don't want it to be too thin. So that's really the lowest point that I'm prepared to start this tile. But that brings me right up to the top of the shelf. And the reason I don't go to the very top of the shelf is because in case the bath isn't quite level, or in case the top of the shelf isn't quite level, if I'm laying the tiles across the top of it, and there's a bit of a slope on the bath, what I can do, let's get these down. What I can do is these tiles come across. If this bath, I mean, I've done my best to level it as well as I can, but you know, sometimes there's things you can't do, like the top of that door. That's nothing to do with me. So that's not quite level. So what will happen is that I will cut. I'm cutting this tile to fit down to the edge. I can cut this down at a slant like that. Obviously, I'm exaggerating it here. But if I had a difference of, say, 2 millimeters or even 1 millimeter across the length of this bath, it's a very small amount for the level to be out. But if I lay this tile here with a small gap for mastic, it'll look significantly larger. Only a small gap will look significantly larger over this end. So that's why you never lay the bottom of the tile, actually the full size bottom of the tile across onto any of the flat surfaces, because in case they're not flat, and then you end up with an increasing gap on one end, which again looks unsightly. So by always making sure that the tile, I'm cutting something off the tile, it gives me the flexibility to be able to lengthen and shorten the tile just to make sure that I've got the same distance down to the bath as the thing goes across. So that's why I never lay the raw edge of a tile onto one of your surfaces that you can't control. So back to here. So I don't want to lay the raw edge of the tile on the top of the bath. So this one has to go higher. That's then too thin. So that we've then hit here. So we've just touched there. Now we're in danger of hitting having a tile run across the top of the shelf, which I don't want to do. So I've got to come up, and I've got to come up to there to get enough clearance above the top of the shelf. So that's fine. So this is the lowest height that this tile can go. Now if I bring this up, that's the highest point it can go as well, because the bottom of it is starting to get too close to the top of the bath. So this whole tile, this is the only place that it can go, either from here or to here. So it's quite a small range of movement flexibility I've got to make this tile work. Now, that works fine for this, but then of course I'm going to be putting another tile on the top of it, which is going to take me into this transition point. And I need to make sure that I've got the right clearances here for the window. And then again, stacking more tiles on top, I've then got the same problem coming here for the top of the door and the cupboard and the window. And you can see, potentially, it comes even more tricky. I could get one in the middle there if I'm lucky. So, what I've done, as you can see, that tile's quite heavy and it's quite tricky to manoeuvre. So to make life easier, I've got myself a measuring stick. You can see I've just put lines on the stick for the length of each tile, and I've added on, most importantly, the width of the spacers. So I'm using a 4mm spacer. So the tiles are 250mm tall, and I'm putting in a 4mm spacer. So each of these lines is 254mm apart from the previous one. So what that enables me to do is I can then line up let's get the camera here. I can line up the line with where I want it to go, and then make sure that the thing is in the right place. So if I line that up to go about there, that brings me, this top of this tile is just below the cupboard, which works quite nicely for me. The next tile comes here. Next tile comes, where are we? Here. Next tile comes here. And the next tile then comes here, which I think that works pretty well as well, actually. So I'll have a solid tile going across the top there with a cutout on the bottom of it. Yeah, so that works quite nicely. So that could work very, very well for me, except that, and this is where this comes in, we have the accent tile. So along with the tiles that I'm laying there, I have to put in this accent tile, which is not a full tile width. So when I'm doing this layout, I need to work out where this accent tile is going to go. It's going to go on top of a whole tile. So the accent tile, I don't want to be crossing a window. I certainly don't want to be cutting this. It's got to be solid all the way around the whole room. It's going to be a solid line that goes around the whole thing. I don't want to be cutting it to go around the top of the bottom of the window. So it's either got to go below the window, below the cupboard, all the way around. Well, yeah. It just can't go on one of these transition points. So it's got to be above it, and it will just stop on the window and start up the other side, or it'll be below and it'll run right the way around the room. So that's the two choices I've got. So this is what I've agreed. It's going to go here. This is the height that my wife wants it to go. So I've drawn some marks there where the accent goes. And what that means then, I'll turn this pole the other way up. If I come down, you can see I've got the accent there. That lines up with the bottom of the accent. So I've got solid tile running down to there. Then got solid tile running all the way down to here. Solid tile running to there. And then the solid tile running all the way down to the bottom, resting on that thing. So that's absolutely perfect line up for me at the bottom section. Now, come through to the top, and let's see what we've got. So here, I've got lining up one tile there, up for another tile there, up for another tile there. I've then got another tile there. That fits far enough above the top of the cupboard to look nice. There's enough clearance below this window, the top of the door and the top of the window there, so that works nicely. And you can see the top of the tile is about, I don't know, 100 mil or so from the top of the ceiling. And if we look down here, if that piece of wood is, as I said, 70 mil, that's about 100 mil off the floor as well. So that's actually worked out perfectly. I've got solid tiles all the way up and down, and I've got the same size gap at the top and the bottom, and it's a good size gap. So I'm really pleased with the way I've managed to get that to line up. Now, one thing I want to touch on as well, which is quite useful. So these transition points, fortunately for me, both times, either with the accent or without the accent, it seemed to line up properly with the tiles. Now, if it hadn't, because remember this was quite restricted, which height I could get that tile to go in. If coming up to the next transition point, it hadn't lined up, it had ended up right in the middle, then what I could have done, is put an accent in. I could have forced an accent in here, a shallow accent, a short accent, which would have then changed the offset of the tiles, and then run a different positioning of the tiles going up. So that's a really important tip when you're trying to manage these transition points and get a nice thickness of tile. That looks good. So you can put in accents actually to change the positioning and get the tiles to line nicely. So really important tip to remember that. Right, so that's transition points. Next video I will cover the horizontal alignment and see how we go from there. Okay, here's the next video now on horizontal alignment. So typically you don't have the same problem with transitions as you do on horizontals as you do on the verticals, but I have got one here which is the edge of the bath. So I need to make sure that I've got a reasonable sized shaped tile that takes me horizontally across that junction. So what I've done is I've laid out the tiles. I just started at one end. I laid the tiles all out end to end, using the spacers, and just see where they ended up. Took it right the way across and worked out I had about 50 mil or so too much tile. So what I did then was come down here, slide this second tile back about 50 mil, reposition the next one. They've all got the spaces in between them. Now when I come across to here, this last tile, is going to need to be cut to go through the end panel of the bath. The end panel of the bath is going to come to about here. So this end tile is going to need to be cut. So this is the last hole tile. So I've run a vertical line up here using the level, and that then gives me something to measure off to go across these tiles. So if I take the next tile across, line that up with the line, got my spacers in, 2 tiles, and then you'll see the last tile overlaps by about 25 mil or so, giving the end tile. So that's how you lay out the horizontal. You can see I've got, I don't know, 1/3 of a tile on top of the bath, so 2/3 of the tile here. We know the transition point, the vertical transition point works nicely. Now we know that the horizontal transition point works. So that's it for the horizontal layout. What I need to do now is I need to cut tiles to go around this radiator. These are the brackets for the radiator. So this bottom tile, I'm not going to actually lay a tile on this part. I'll lay a tile to here and I'll lay a tile to here. So this end tile here, which is going to go here and another one here, another one here, I'm just going to cut the end off it. Well, actually no, it's going to be an L shape, because I don't want it to look unsightly underneath. Then there'll be a tile with the end cut off, and then coming up here there'll be another L shape cut out that will take me across there. I'm probably going to have to cut the end off this tile because it's just reaching into there a little bit, so I'll have an L shape cut out of that one tile that's a bit short, and another L shape that will take me over the top there. This one right in the middle of it, so I'm going to have to cut a U shape channel out of this one. This one's this way around, so I'm going to cut a U shape down, across, up. I'm not going to be very accurate because the radiator comes all the way out to here, so it doesn't need to be super accurate. And then there's going to be one tile that's just cut in half, and it's got this piece cut out the middle of it, so I'll just be laying that side, and then we'll have at the top a U-shaped piece with that cut out of it, and then it'll be some very rapid tiling, whoosh, right the way up the wall. Anyway, I'll get these cut and lay all the middle section, and then I'll probably do another piece when we come to do the edge tiles and the top. And I'll do some more as I go along round the window. We've got edging to do around the window, and trying to think where else we've got edging. We'll have an edging on the corner of this piece here. Yeah, on the now here's an interesting thing on the horizontal symmetry we need to think of. So here, this is this wall. See here, this wall here is recessed, and then the wall comes out, and then there's a flat wall along here that's all going to be tiled. This is a cupboard that's got a glass door on the front of it, and what I'm going to have above this basin here, there's going to be a mirror, which is going to be the same size as the mirror that's on the front of this cupboard. So I'm going to have some tiles here, then there's going to be a mirror, same size as this, then there's going to be tiles down here, and there's going to be tiles down here. So when I'm doing this layout, I need to make sure that the width of the tiles here is the same as here, and same as here, so get nice symmetry. Yeah, okay.